A white Ford Transit van pulls into a quiet residential neighborhood in Northport, Florida. It's September 1st, 2021. The van belongs to a 22-year-old woman named Gabby Petito. But the person stepping out of the driver's seat is not Gabby. It's her fiancé, Brian Laundrie. He drove over 2,500 miles from Wyoming to Florida alone. And he didn't say a word about where Gabby was. Not to her family, not to police, not to anyone. He simply walked inside his parents' house and closed the door. People would spend the next several weeks asking the same question. How does a man drive across the country without the woman he left with and say nothing? That question would eventually lead investigators deep into the wilderness of Wyoming. What they found there would break a family's heart, and what came after would shock the entire country. To understand what happened to Gabby Petito, you first have to understand who she was. Not the name on the missing person flyer, not the face on the news, the real Gabby. She was born on March 19, 1999 on Long Island, New York. Grew up the way a lot of kids do on Long Island, close to family, close to home, close to the water. People who knew Gabby describe her the same way, over and over. Creative, warm, energetic. She lit up a room. She cared about people deeply. She was sensitive in the best possible way. She felt things fully, and she wanted others to feel good too. By the time she was a young adult, Gabby had developed a clear dream. She wanted to be a travel content creator, not just visiting places, documenting them, capturing the beauty of the country through photographs and video, building a life on the road and sharing it with the world. It wasn't a passive daydream. She was actively working toward it. She and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, had purchased a Ford Transit van. They spent months converting it into a mobile home, a small, livable space, with everything they needed to travel. They named it. They decorated it. They made it theirs. The plan was a cross-country road trip beginning in the summer of 2021. Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, the American West. All of it documented, all of it shared with their growing online audience. Gabby had already started posting. The videos showed an adventurous young woman in love with wide-open spaces and golden hour light. She looked happy. She looked free. But there is always a distance between what a camera captures and what is actually happening. The trip began on July 2nd, 2021. They headed west from New York, stopping at national parks, camping spots, and hiking trails along the way. Online, the posts continued. Gabby smiling on a mountaintop. The two of them in front of stunning vistas. Van life filtered through a lens of wanderlust and romance. What the posts didn't show was the tension building underneath. By August, the couple had reached Utah, and something had gone seriously wrong. On August 12, 2021, police in Moab, Utah received a call from a witness. The witness reported seeing a man striking a woman near their van. Officers located the vehicle and pulled it over. What happened next was captured in full-on police bodycam footage. The footage would later be seen by millions of people around the world. Gabby sits outside the van crying. Her face is red and streaked with tears. She is trying to explain something to officers, but her words are coming in fragments. She is visibly distressed. The kind of distress that goes beyond a simple argument. She mentions that she had been struggling with her mental health. She takes responsibility. She insists things are fine. At one point, she is asked directly about the marks on her body. She has difficulty answering. Officers separate Brian and Gabby. They interview them individually. A witness confirmed seeing Brian hit Gabby before the stop. Police decide to handle it as a mental health crisis rather than a domestic violence incident. No charges are filed. The couple is separated for the night. Brian stays at a motel. Gabby stays with the van. The next morning, they continue the trip. Looking back at that footage now, it is almost unbearable to watch because Gabby was still alive. She still had time. And the people who could see she was in distress, they let her go. After Moab, the couple traveled north into Wyoming. The landscape out there is extraordinary, vast, remote, and breathtaking. The kind of scenery Gabby had always dreamed of documenting. They camped in the Spread Creek dispersed camping area near Bridger-Teton National Forest, just outside the boundary of Grand Teton National Park. The last confirmed sightings that placed Gabby Petito alive occurred in late August 2021, around August 27th. And then her trail goes cold. On August 30th, Gabby's family received a text from her phone. The message was unusual. The wording didn't sound like Gabby. Her family noticed. They reached out again. She didn't respond. Then the calls stopped going through entirely. September 1st, Brian Laundrie arrives at his parents' home in Northport, Florida. He is driving Gabby's van. Gabby is not with him. Her family reaches out to the Laundrie family. They want to know where Gabby is. They haven't heard from her in days. The Laundrie family does not provide answers. Brian does not speak to them. Days pass. Gabby's parents wait. They try to be patient. They tell themselves there must be an explanation. Maybe the couple had an argument. Maybe she needed time alone. Maybe something technical happened with her phone. The explanations become harder to believe the longer the silence stretches. On September 11th, 10 days after, Brian came home without her. Gabby's parents made the call they had been dreading. They reported their daughter missing, and the world would never be the same. The missing person report landed like a stone dropped into still water. Law enforcement launched an immediate investigation. Gabby Petito, 22 years old. Last known location, Wyoming. Last known contact, end of August. Fiancé returned without her. Family has no information. Within days, the case exploded across social media and national news. People across the country shared Gabby's photo. Tips flooded in. The missing person flyers spread faster than most investigations ever experience. Something about this case caught the public's attention in a way that was rare. Maybe it was her age. Maybe it was the van life documentation. The footage that made her feel like someone you knew, someone you had followed, someone who had been right in front of you and then simply vanished. On September 15th, investigators formally named Brian Laundrie a person of interest. He still had not spoken to Gabby's family. He still had not spoken publicly. And then something unbelievable happened. 2 days later, September 17th, Brian Laundrie's parents reported that he was missing. The only person who knew where Gabby was had disappeared. For a moment, the entire investigation seemed to stop breathing. There were now 2 missing people. One young woman who had vanished in Wyoming, and the man who came home without her, who had now vanished from Florida. While the search for Brian Laundrie was ongoing in Florida, investigators in Wyoming were focused on a different task. Search teams were combing the rugged terrain near the Spread Creek dispersed camping area. The region is remote. The landscape is dense with sagebrush and tall grasses. the kind of place where something could be hidden for a long time. September 19, 2021. FBI agents discovered human remains. They were found in an area consistent with the couple's known camping locations. Gabby's family was notified. They already knew. In the quiet way that families come to know the worst things before anyone tells them. 2 days later, the remains were formally confirmed as those of Gabby Petito. The investigation changed in an instant. This was no longer a missing person case. This was a homicide investigation. Investigators needed to understand what had happened to Gabby. The autopsy was completed in the weeks following the discovery. On October 12, 2021, the Teton County coroner released the findings. The manner of death, homicide. The cause of death, manual strangulation. There were also blunt force injuries to the head and neck. The coroner estimated that the death had occurred weeks before the remains were discovered, placing the time of death in the final days of August, around the time Gabby was last confirmed alive. Around the time those unusual text messages were sent from her phone, around the time Brian Laundrie started driving home alone. Manual strangulation, not an accident, not an illness, not a fall. Someone had done this deliberately, someone who had been with her. The public had suspected it. Investigators had suspected it. But hearing it confirmed, hearing the word homicide attached to Gabby's name, made it real in a new and terrible way. Her family had to grieve not just that she was gone, but how she was gone, the fear she must have felt, the things she must have hoped for in those last moments that didn't come. While the coroner was delivering those findings, law enforcement in Florida was engaged in a massive search. Brian Laundrie had been missing for nearly a month. Hundreds of agents, officers, and volunteers searched the Carlton Reserve, a vast nature preserve not far from the Laundrie family home. The preserve is difficult terrain, swampy, heavily wooded, spanning over 25,000 acres. Investigators searched for weeks. They found nothing. The case was building in terms of evidence. On September 23rd, a federal warrant had been issued connecting Brian to unauthorized use of Gabby's debit card after her estimated time of death. Someone had been using her card after she was already gone. The evidence was accumulating. The picture was becoming undeniable. But without Brian Laundrie, there would be no arrest, no courtroom, no moment where someone would have to sit across from Gabby's family and answer for what had been done. And then October 20th arrived. October 20th, 2021. Investigators returned to a previously searched area of the Carlton Reserve. What they found had not been there before, or had not been visible before, due to recent weather conditions that had altered the landscape. Skeletal remains, a backpack, a notebook, a revolver. The remains were later confirmed through dental records to belong to Brian Laundrie. The cause of death determined in November, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Brian Laundrie had died in the same reserve where his family had reported him missing. He had been there, possibly, the entire time. There would be no trial, no testimony, no moment of public accountability. Gabby's family, who had been waiting, who had been watching every development, who had hoped to look Brian Laundrie in the eye in a courtroom, would never get that moment. But there was still one more piece. The notebook. The FBI examined Brian Laundrie's notebook carefully. On January 21st, 2022, the Bureau released a statement closing the investigation. The notebook, they said, contained written statements in which Brian Laundrie accepted responsibility for Gabby Petito's death. He had written it down. Not everything investigators found in those pages was accepted. Brian had offered explanations and circumstances surrounding what happened. The FBI did not publicly endorse those explanations, but the core admission that he was responsible was accepted. It was the closest thing to a confession that Gabby's family would ever receive. Written in the handwriting of the man who had come home without her, a confession to no one in particular, left in the wilderness with a backpack and a gun. The investigation was officially closed. The case of Gabby Petito was resolved in the legal sense. The responsible party had been identified. The FBI had made its conclusions. But resolution is not the same as justice, and justice is not the same as closure. Even without a trial, the evidence in this case told a story. It told the story in layers, the way the best investigations do. The bodycam footage from Moab, Utah, showed a relationship with Sirius, documented problems, a crying young woman, a witness account of physical violence, a moment where the system had a chance to intervene and didn't. The text messages from Gabby's phone in late August raised immediate questions. The phrasing was wrong. Investigators scrutinized those messages carefully. Someone had been sending them after Gabby was already dead. The travel records and phone activity allowed investigators to reconstruct a timeline. They could trace movements. They could account for time. They could establish when Gabby was last definitively alive and when the story Brian was telling simply didn't hold together. The debit card use, after the estimated time of death, connected Brian to activity that presumed Gabby was alive long after she wasn't. The body's location was consistent with the couple's known camping area. The forensic findings aligned with the timeline. Every piece pointed the same direction. And the notebook, written in his own hand, responsibility accepted. Each piece of evidence, alone, might mean something different. Together, they meant one thing. This case became one of the most widely covered true crime stories in the social media era, and that attention brought with it a complicated conversation. Many people pointed out that countless missing persons, particularly women of color, never received this level of coverage or public engagement. That is a real and important observation. Gabby's family has acknowledged it. Advocates have used this moment to push for greater attention to all missing persons cases. There is also the conversation about domestic violence, about what the Moab encounter represented, about the systems designed to protect people in dangerous relationships, and the moments where those systems fail. Gabby's family has not retreated from that conversation. They have leaned into it. They have continued to speak publicly, to advocate, to channel the weight of their grief into something that might protect someone else's daughter. That is an extraordinary thing to do, and it is exactly what Gabby would have wanted. Because if you look at who she was, creative, caring, sensitive, ambitious, full of love for the world around her, you see someone who would have hated the idea of her story ending quietly. She wanted to document life. She wanted to share it. She wanted to make people feel something in a way she never could have imagined and never would have chosen. She still is. Gabby Petito's family has never been the same. That is not a dramatic statement. It is simply true. No family is ever the same after losing someone the way they lost Gabby. Her mother described the months after Gabby's death as an unending fog, the kind where you keep reaching for something normal, and finding it has shifted slightly to the left of where it used to be. Gabby's bedroom, by some accounts, remained exactly as she left it. The travel plans she had made, the content she had started, the engagement she had been building with the people who followed her online. All of it simply stopped, mid-sentence, the way a life cut short always does. But her family made a choice. They chose not to let her name become only a tragedy. They established a foundation in her honor. They have spoken to lawmakers about missing persons. They have supported other families who found themselves suddenly living inside the same nightmare. Gabby's name has appeared in bills, in conversations, in the kind of policy discussions that might change what happens to the next person who cries in front of a police camera and goes home with the person who hurt her. That is the legacy of a 22-year-old woman who just wanted to document the world. There is a video Gabby posted in the summer of 2021. She is somewhere in the American West. The light is golden, the kind of afternoon light that photographers chase their whole careers. She is laughing at something off camera. Her hair is catching the wind. She looks free. She looks like someone at the beginning of something, not the end. That video is still there. It will stay there. Long after the headlines have moved on and the news cycle has found something new to obsess over, that video will still exist. Gabby Petito smiling in golden hour light, laughing at something off camera, alive, that is who she was. Not a case file, not a hashtag, not a Wikipedia article. A girl from Long Island who loved travel and family, and the way mountains look at dusk, who had so much more left to show the world.